Welcome to another episode of Mobile Technology Spotlight, sponsored by Samsung Electronics and proudly presented by Public Safety Insight. I'm Dale Stockton, and today I'll be talking with Cindy Anderson. She's one of the most experienced and talented crime analysts in our country. Her work history started with the U.S. Marine Corps. After that, she began to transition to crime analytics, and she started as an intern at Carlsbad, California PD. We brought her in to speak with the Samsung Public Safety Advisory Council recently, and we were so impressed with the way she covered this topic. The council members couldn't get enough of it. It was great. Cindy spent years leveraging data, technology, and investigative techniques in support of officers and agencies, and she was recognized as the 2022 Intel Analyst of the Year in the state of California. That's notable in itself. She currently serves as Carlsbad's civilian manager. That's equivalent to a police captain. And she has responsibility for the records section, the communications section, crime analysis, and is going to be involved in the rollout of the agency's real-time crime center. She also teaches crime analytics at the university level. So I don't want to spend any more time. I want to get right to interacting with Cindy. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I'm absolutely certain people that hear this will take something away and be challenged by all the things you're doing. Let's start with this, Cindy. What brought you into this field originally? How did you get drawn in?
Well, hi, Dale, and thank you for having me today. Yeah, we'll jump right in. So as you said, I started here at Carlsbad PD as an intern 18 years ago. And at that time, I was just getting my feet wet into law enforcement. I was just getting to know what law enforcement does and learning about the different career fields in law enforcement, not really sure what I was going to do. And at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of career opportunities for civilians as there is today for professional staff. And so I started out during the internship, I was the investigative aide in our detective bureau, and I helped them with their cases, identifying what cases needed to be filed and where they were going, just helping them keep track of their cases. And during that time, as I was going through cases, I realized that there was a trend going on with a vehicle burglary series that was happening in Carlsbad at a certain location. It happened during a very particular time in a particular location in which they were targeting certain types of people, and they were stealing laptops from these people. In reviewing about a couple weeks worth of data, I found this trend and I gave it to one of my detectives and I said, hey, I think that these suspects are the same people, and I think that they're targeting this, and I think they like to hit on Tuesdays and Thursdays during lunchtime in this particular restaurant row, and they all seem to be targeting the same type of vehicles that the victims are driving. So the detective sergeant took that and he said, hey, let's put together an operation and see if we can catch these bad guys. And so I put together a little synopsis of what I found, and they put an op plan together, and they went out, and on their first day, they caught these two suspects. They caught two suspects who were in the midst of breaking into a victim's vehicle. And it turned out to be so much bigger than what we all thought it was. We thought it was just a vehicle burglary series, and it turned out that they were stealing laptops that were being taken for its proprietary information. Because one of the trends I noticed that was that all the victims had worked for tech companies that were in Carlsbad. So that ended up blowing up into this huge federal national security case, and all starting from little old Carlsbad, from an intern who had noticed a trend. And so my detective said, hey, have you heard of crime analysis? And I said, I have no idea what crime analysis is, but that sounds interesting. And he says, well, you just did exactly that. So when we had an opening for crime analysis here in Carlsbad, I applied for it. Here I am 18 years later doing the same thing, but every day in, day out, this is what we identify. This is what we track. This is how we identify trends in series, and this is how we caught bad guys.
I love the story. And I'm so glad that you followed that, because it's benefited a lot of people. So let's go to kind of a baseline. Crime analysis in one form or another. It's been around. I remember when I started, we were pushing pins into the maps in the briefing room. So walk us through kind of the major milestones in the last couple of decades. How did it start? beyond that, pushing pins into the map, and where are we today?
Yeah, so back in like the early 90s, early 2000s, we were very stat driven. New York PD invented, or they coined what's called a comp stat. It was a popular method that is a performance management system that was used by a lot of police departments to track crime patterns and evaluate the effectiveness of their policing strategies and trying to improve their decision making. And this is where I started. When I first started, my office was right next to the chief's, and I was giving him performance measures in numbers. And we tracked crime rates and response times, clearance percentages, and other metrics. But the problem with that is that it was more reactive than proactive. We responded to trends after the fact, and there was a lot of delays between computing all the data, making the decisions, and then gathering and getting the information into the hands of the officers. So a short time later, after I started, it was about 2012, we started getting into more of the analysis and intelligence led policing. So my office moved from next to the chiefs at the time into the detective bureau, where I assisted detectives with their cases. And then once again, in about 2014, down to the first floor between our briefing room and our watch commander's office. And here I started hosting our weekly meetings with the watch commanders, our crime suppression team, attending briefings more frequently and telling them where to go, who to look for. And this is where we saw the evolution, like I said, where we went more into intelligence-led policing. I remember when we first implemented this, one of our very old school officers who was like really close to retiring, he put his feet on his desk and he said, he crossed his arms and he said, "So you're going to tell me what to do?" It wasn't very popular. It wasn't a very popular way of thinking for law enforcement at the time, because now we have somebody who is just using data to tell them what to do and where to go. But then fast forward 2 years later, I had officers lining up in my office asking me where to go, where to find the nuggets, where to find the bad guys. So where should they look for these crimes that were happening? And all that occurred because I used data from the past and from the present, and we would take that and then we would try to predict where the crime would happen next. And then 10 years later now, we're looking at real time. So with the real time crime analysis, we can have custodies or suspects in custody within minutes of committing an offense. Like unlike before, when we would take the report and we would wait a few days for it to be written and get processed through records and then get assigned to a detective before we can start working it. Now we're working these cases in the field as they're happening. Right after the dispatcher takes the call, we start looking immediately. We start reviewing video. We start reviewing all of our tools, our license plate readers, our surveillance, any technology that we have, any resources that we have. We start working it immediately. Yeah, the evolution is amazing, going from being very reactive now to being very proactive and working in real time.
That's great. But, a term that we often hear associated with crime analysis is spatial analysis, maybe a little crime analysis 101, but could you explain what that term means and how you use it when you're working a series?
Yes, I have a very big soft spot for spatial analysis because although it sounds scary and boring, I actually teach this part at my university. So spatial analysis is examining the surroundings of crime and looking at, well, what affects crimes? What is impacting this crime trend? And so you look at not only the geographical layer of things, but then also things that like impact it, like, what's the landscape there? Look at their literal landscape. Is it an area that's easy for suspects to get in and out of? Who lives in that area? Is there coverage for them? Are there transient camps nearby? Are there schools and parks nearby? Are there shopping centers? Are there motels? Is it close to the freeways? What are the demographics? Because when you study the demographics, when you study the spatial layers, it helps you really be able to predict crime then. And you can then utilize all the information to deploy your resources. You know that where the motels are cheaper, you're more likely to have a certain type of crime. Where your shopping centers are, you're going to have more retail crime. Where your schools and parks are, you want to make sure that we don't have sex offenders living near there because they have more access to young children. Near the freeway exits, if you have crime along the freeway exits, you know that these suspects are likely going to be people who may not be as familiar with your city and will want to stick to areas where they know they can easily escape. So, just a quick example of that. I have several stories to tell, but quick example is a few years ago, we had a series of restaurant burglaries, commercial burglaries, where the suspects were using sledgehammers, and they would break into the restaurant using the sledgehammer, and they're in and out of the restaurant within minutes. They just break the window and come in and steal the safe. They'll steal the iPad, steal the cash from inside the register, or whatever they can get their hands on, in and out in 5 minutes. And using the data that we had, we knew that they were going to hit a certain type of restaurant because they knew which restaurants had cash and which ones did not accept cash. And we knew that these were likely suspects that weren't from our area. They would come down on the I-5 freeway, which leads into Carlsbad. So we knew that they would likely stay along main thoroughfares. So using this information, we were able to deploy our resources and send our officers to those locations to extra patrol. We also use the tactic of not necessarily going straight to those restaurants, but patrolling nearby and looking for any vehicles exiting the freeway that might be headed that way. They used a lot of other resources to run the cars, see if they were from the area, if they were from out of town, and then using investigative resources like social media, for instance, following suspects on social media. We were able to use all those and not only apprehend the suspects, but we were also able to deter a lot of those restaurant burglaries from happening in our city. Another example of spatial analysis and geographic profiling is when we had a series of brewery burglaries. This one particular suspect was breaking into breweries from Carlsbad all the way down to San Diego and then all the way up to Riverside County. Using all those points, the data points of where he had hit, we were able to triangulate that data to find what type of vehicle that he was driving based on the LPR hits. And then also using that data, we were able to figure out where he was likely staying and where he was living. We knew he was going to be living in his car based off of behavioral analysis and all the information that we have from our cases. We were able to use all those geographic locations, triangulate that data. By the end of the series, we had about 20 cases. We were able to find him, find his vehicle because we found his vehicle through LPR, locate him, locate the stolen property, and charge him with all of the cases that we had put together based on the data that we had collected using the geographic profiling and the triangulation of the data that we had.
That's a great answer. And it's also a nice lead in to where I want to go with this next question. I noticed during the council meeting and then today, you're giving examples where you're looking at crimes that are happening outside your jurisdiction. And typically municipal police departments, for the longest time, it's like, if it didn't happen in our town, we don't care. If it's not happening in our town, we don't care. But you're taking a whole different approach to it and looking beyond your borders. I think it's evident why you're doing that, but give us a broader perspective, maybe some encouragement for those who are still relegated to, I only look at cases that are here. Why do you need to be looking at crimes that haven't even taken place in your jurisdiction?
One thing that I always say to other people in law enforcement, actually to anybody in general, is that suspects do not know jurisdictional boundaries. They do not care what city they're in. Although now they are starting to pay a little bit more attention because of, the harsher penalties that are in certain counties. But, for the most part, they don't care if they're stealing from Oceanside or Carlsbad or San Diego, But one thing I will say, I do want to throw this out there, is that in San Diego County, we are so fortunate to have ARGIS. And ARGIS is the Automated Regional Justice Information System that allows our entire county to communicate with a push of a button. So here in Carlsbad, I am able to see data from all across the county. I am able to see any crime reports, any arrests that have been made, any traffic collisions, any BOLO, be on the lookout for crime trends and suspects that we're trying to apprehend. Argis has made it so easy for us to share information. So we were very, very fortunate here in San Diego County to be able to not only collect the data, but share it very easily. So having that as a tool for us has made it really easy for me to identify things that are happening not only in my city, but around our city as well. And so from there, we kind of just expanded. We started paying attention. I started paying attention to things that were happening in LA and Orange County and San Bernardino and Riverside County, because like I said, suspects don't know jurisdictional boundaries. They go where they can steal stuff from. They go where they can commit the crime. And I knew that if they were hitting in LA and they were hitting in Orange County, it was only going to be a matter of time before we start seeing the same trend in San Diego County. And sure enough, every time that we would see a notice from LA saying, "Hey, we're seeing this restaurant burglary series," it was just a matter of days or weeks before we would start getting hits down here. So it became very apparent that we needed to share this information because we were all seeing the same suspects, and it removed the need to duplicate work when we started working together. So some of the things that as an analyst I started doing was hosting regional meetings. So down here in San Diego County, through the help of Argis, we were able to host San Diego-wide meetings where the detectives and crime analysts would come together on a bi-monthly basis just to share all of our case information. And every single time, every single one of these meetings, we would be able to resolve at least one or two cases because somebody was able to identify a suspect that we were looking for, or somebody had already arrested a suspect in a series we were working. So with that, we started expanding that out to the region. So I started working with other analysts throughout the surrounding counties. I started working with the analysts from Orange County, Riverside County, LA, San Bernardino, even all the way up to Kern County, Santa Barbara County. We all got on an email thread and started sharing information. From there, just kind of expanded. But then every quarter we would host a meeting and we would rotate the location of these meetings so that it would be fair and equitable to people trying to make it to these regional meetings. And from there, we just discovered so many of the same crews that were hitting all of our jurisdictions. And still to this day, I mean, I still talk to a lot of these analysts and we still share that information. We share BOLOs. Now there's statewide distributions. With the introduction of the South American Theft Group, there is a nationwide distribution specifically for SATG. I've also learned that is so important too, is people are so readily willing to assist. When we send messages out like, "Hey, can somebody help me identify this?" Usually we'll get a response back of, "Hey, I ran him in my databases. This is what I found." Or, "Hey, this suspect hit in our area here. This is what we have." When we're chasing the SATG crew, we identified suspects that were being looked at in Illinois. We arrested a crew. We found that there were cases that they were wanted out of New York and Chicago. So the times have changed, not just for law enforcement, but for crews, for these crime trends as well, in that these suspects are very mobile now. They're very transient. They can flow from one area to another in a heartbeat. And so it's just getting more and more important than ever to share that information with each other.
I hope people are listening to this and taking note, because this is what they got into public safety for, and to make the quality of life better for their citizens. And it's clear that you're doing that. So I appreciate that. Let's go a different direction for a minute, because a lot of people, when they hear just how effective you are, especially when you're leveraging tools like license plate readers and social media analysis, they get a little concerned about privacy. So how do you balance effective policing with the concerns people have?
So that's a great point, Dale. One thing that our agency is very great about is transparency. We make that a priority through public engagement, through public awareness. With our discussion about LPRs here in Carlsbad, we post that on our website. We post our policies, we post our usage, we have frequent audits. We put all these policies in place to ensure that the community knows we are only using this data to solve crime, and we're not abusing that privilege of trust that they have given us. We, like I said, when it comes to our LPRs and our surveillance, we're very transparent about it. There's no secret about where our cameras are. You come into our city, you know exactly where they're at, which, some people might say, hey, this might jeopardize, our ability to apprehend somebody if they know where our LPRs are. But ultimately, the trust of the public is still more important, is very important. And we want to make sure that the public is aware of what we're doing and is comfortable with what we're doing. So, like I said, public engagement is a key component of it. Before we implemented our LPR program, we did a lot of community meetings, community engagement meetings. We educated our city council. We did multiple presentations. Once again, like I said, just putting that information out there. Even our social media, we're very transparent on our social media with what our officers are doing, how the tax dollars are being spent, and how our suspects are being apprehended, so that they can see that return of investment. Hey, our city spent this much money on this technology. This is what we are getting out of it. This is the end result of what you have entrusted us with. So that is very, very important.
That's great. Let's go different direction. You in Carlsbad are on the verge of rolling out a real-time crime center. So this is something we're seeing across the country, agencies standing these things up. From the perspective of a crime analyst, what makes for a successful RTCC, and what advice might you have for agencies that are either planning one or they're upgrading one that may not have taken full advantage of crime analytics?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of research on this, attending the Real Time Crime Center Association conference, and visiting multiple real time crime centers throughout California and Arizona. And honestly, the most effective thing is finding what works for your agency, because no two real time crime centers have been the same that I have seen. And every single one of them does things a little bit differently. And ours is going to be a little bit different than everything that we have seen as well. And it can be a big, robust one. The city of Beverly Hills has a wonderful, robust system that works so wonderful for them. And it's amazing. If anybody has ever had a chance to tour that, if you're able to, I definitely recommend it. But I also recommend touring places like Elk Grove, where it's a little bit of a smaller city. They still have a great, robust RTCC, but it's catered to their city. It's catered to their demographics. And then, going into Arizona, their RTCC looks a little bit different, and also because it's catered to their demographic. So what makes for a successful RTCC is identifying the need in your jurisdiction of what you want to make it, how you want to make it work for you, and not trying to just do something because another agency does it. And start small. One thing I've also found is every agency that I've seen, where they were on day one is not where they are today. You start small, you get your city, your officers, your analysts, allow them that time to adjust, and then you grow from there. That is what I've learned in my journey so far, and everyone that I have talked to that has a great RTCC has said the same thing, is everybody's got to start somewhere, start small and grow.
That's great. So RTCC, a lot of people cringe, and maybe technology in general, because it costs money. So talk a little bit about budget and the cost of embracing crime analysis. Make a case for why this force multiplier, if you will, gives you a good ROI.
Yeah. So when you think about things from the perspective of who you're serving, that's the most important thing to think about. The best uses that I have seen of a real-time crime center is that immediate return. So you have, your 2-year-old walks away from your house. Your elderly grandmother with dementia has driven away from the home. And in times like that, seconds matter. That's when the real-time crime center is going to be so important in locating these people that you're looking for. Gone are those days of, hey, we're just going to take the report, or waiting 24 hours to file the report and then putting out flyers. With the real-time crime center, they can plug in immediately. Plug in that license plate of your elderly grandmother who drove off. and turn on those cameras, start focusing on those cameras, send out your drones to look for this missing child. And being able to immediately locate them quickly without waiting for resources, waiting for an officer to get off a call, waiting for help to come in, being able to just turn on this technology and find them immediately, I think that's going to be your best case scenario. But also, when we think about crime related things like apprehending a suspect as they're making the getaway immediately, your car gets stolen and being able to find that car immediately before it gets taken down to a chop shop, and never seen again. I think those make the best argument on return of investment. Those are things that you can't always calculate the dollar value on. I mean, how do you put a dollar value on finding a missing child or preventing something that could have ended horribly? Another great use of RTCC that I have seen with the drone as a first responder program is somebody had called in a suspicious person with a gun. And, when you receive that call on the other line, being a police officer, being a dispatcher, that is a very dangerous call to respond to. You don't know what you're going to encounter when you get there. This person with a gun, are they dangerous? Are they going to immediately shoot? But then also, is it a gun? Or do they really have a gun? And how are they going to react when they see police officers? So having what I've seen with real-time crime centers and drone as a first responder is sending out that drone or turning on that camera, turning on that surveillance camera and zooming in to see, hey, you know what? That's actually not a gun. That was an airbrush or a hairbrush or an umbrella, and being able to disengage from that. I mean, something like that saves lives. It can quickly turn into a situation where people's lives are in danger if somebody really thought it was a gun. And that ability to disengage and not interact with somebody who somebody had called in and said was armed, I think there's no dollar value that you could put on that. And that's on top of the great arrests and the stolen item recoveries and the instant gratification of all the other types of crimes that we're able to solve immediately. I think hopefully that answers your question about money.
There's never enough, but when you can leverage technology, it can be very effective. I love that. You've already given us a couple of great stories, but I'm curious what maybe your favorite one is. Could you walk us through a case where crime analysis directly influenced the investigation? Maybe you caught somebody that just wouldn't have otherwise been caught and might have, if they had been caught, it just would have been an opportunistic single case, but this favorite one of yours is much bigger than that. Walk us through one, please.
I would say probably my favorite one is this armed residential burglary series that we had countywide. The suspect was a couple years ago. He was armed and he was going door to door. He would find houses that he would target and he would go ring the doorbell, see if anybody was home. He was always dressed in a nice suit. If somebody answered the door, he would play that role of, I'm a salesman and I'm here to sell you something, and he would sweet talk them. But if nobody was home, then he would break in and burglarize the residence. And he had a firearm in the event that he encountered somebody inside the residence after he broke in. So obviously he was very dangerous. We started tracking, I say we because as a region, the crime analysts and I all worked together on this series. But we started tracking these cases and we quickly realized that how dangerous he was because of the fact that he was armed during these encounters and how we knew that quickly could have changed the scenario if he decided to use his firearm. So we started tracking all of them, collecting all of the surveillance photos that we had. Using the information that we had, we came up with a possible suspect. I built a profile on him, researched him, found out what cars he was driving, did the whole analyst's magic, right, of identifying people and then knowing who they were. And one day I am listening to the radio, a police scanner radio, because this is what an analyst should be doing, is monitoring day to day what's going on in your city. And again, here in San Diego County, we have what's called LE North Command, where we're able to hear the broadcast of the entire county for major incidents. So if you have like a big case, if you have something that's jeopardizing officer safety, you can broadcast that out on LE North Command. And so I hear Escondido PD which is 2 cities away from us, broadcasts they just had a residential burglary. Suspect was possibly armed, and they gave his description: Hispanic male, silver explorer. And so I immediately called over to Escondido PD, to the detective over there, and I said, can you send me a picture that sounds like the suspect I'm working on? And he sends me the picture, and it was a great picture of the suspect. And I said, I knew who it was immediately. Within hours, we were able to get all of our groups together, every detective, every analyst, the FBI, the DA's office, who were all assigned to the series. We finally had enough probable cause to go find this guy and arrest him, just because of that quick identification. So within a couple hours, we were able to find him, and they did their investigations, they did their investigative work. I don't want to disclose too much of it, but it ended up turning into an officer-involved shooting because he was armed. He had burglarized another house, and while he was escaping, he turned around and he pulled out his gun and tried to fire at a deputy, who then shot him. Luckily, no one was hurt. Suspect did survive the encounter, but it turned into this big news story on how data analytics and teamwork and information sharing solved this series. We ultimately charged him with, I think, 25 residential burglaries, and then the assault on the officer. And he was sentenced to, I think, like 65 consecutive life sentences. I may be exaggerating, maybe 65 years, but it was a long time for what was at that time thought to be a property crime. And that was probably my favorite one because of so many jurisdictions involved and all of the work of the crime analysts coming together. And then, like I said, just the immediate reaction of listening to the radio and sharing information, hearing something that happened 2 cities over, and being able to identify them within minutes of them broadcasting it. And then, the icing on the cake was him going away for so long. That was probably my favorite story.
That's a great example. So we hear all these days, Cindy, about AI and predictive analytics and even a term like automated surveillance. What do you see as the future of crime analysis?
So specifically for crime analysis, it is a force multiplier for us and a huge, huge, huge time saver for us. This week, I was actually just in a briefing where they showed us how they are using AI, how we can use AI by uploading all of our crime data, all the data that we have, into AI and giving it prompts like, find me crime trends. What is the most common time of day? What is the most common time of week? Are there any commonalities? And within like 5 seconds, the AI program was able to map out everything that we had thrown at it, and then identified anything that was common between those cases, anything that stood out as a potential trend, and then told us what was the busiest time of day, where the officer should go patrol. These things used to take us hours to do. We would have to download it into a CSV file, throw it into Esri, map it out, go through all the reports, go through the data, comb through the data, write things out by hand. And it was such a time saver. And I cannot wait for that evolution, because that gives us more time to work on things that AI cannot work on, because you still need that human factor, right? You're still going to need somebody reviewing this for accuracy, make sure that it's correct, but taking it to that next step of investigating this and providing additional feedback to officers. But all that took seconds to do when it used to take me hours, if not days, to be able to compile that much data into one. Another thing that we found with AI, with companies out there that are using AI for crime analysis, is being able to find suspects on social media and being able to quickly identify who their associates are based off what they post on social media. Gone are those days of clicking on one profile, going down rabbit holes of trying to find their mom and trying to identify who their sister is. Now there's AI software out there that allows you to just punch in who your suspect is, who you're looking for, and it quickly scours what's out there and finds, is this your suspect? And then from there, it takes off of, here's who his mom is, here's all the people that have been tagged in his photos, here's all the times that he's uploaded pictures of vehicles. And like I said, this used to take us days to do. Being able to find this data, and AI is now able to do that in seconds. it's just such a force multiplier for us. And the possibilities are endless. But right now, those are probably my top two favorite uses of AI in crime analysis.
It's a great example. And I love the fact that you underscore the importance of a human being looking at it. You can't just, AI is not a death ray that eliminates all the crooks. So even though we might wish that it did, in the little time we have left, let's ask you, you're clearly an expert in this field. For someone who's listening to this and going, we really don't have a crime analysis program. We're really not doing what we should be doing, clearly. What recommendations, what best practices, how do they get started or enhance what they're already doing?
That's a great question because I'm actually working with another agency in a few weeks who wants to develop their own crime analysis program. And so, just like the Real Time Crime Center, I would recommend talking to an agency that has one and seeing how they run it, but then also evaluating their needs. What do you want your crime analyst to work on? Some agencies have their crime analysts focused on helping out doing investigative assistance, helping out with cell phone dumps, mapping things out. Some of them have them on the Real Time Crime Center, and some of them have somewhere like in between. So identifying what it is that your agency needs. And then also, right now there's a lot of courses, as you know, I teaching this, we teach it through Post, and we also teach it through the university of educating not only the crime analyst, but educating command staff of what crime analysis is. So understanding what exactly a crime analyst is capable of doing, what they can offer. I think sometimes people don't always know what a crime analyst does, and all the things that they can do. So starting with educating yourself, educating your agency, and then just finding out what the need is, and then building from there would be my recommendation. And there's a lot of, this is an emerging field. This is a great career, and I may be biased, but this is honestly the best career in law enforcement if you're trying to work in law enforcement, but you don't want to be a police officer. A lot of people ask how I got my start, and I said, well, I knew I wanted to work in law enforcement, but I don't want to be a police officer. I don't have that in me to be one. And this is honestly the best field. And right now it is booming, and there are so many aspiring crime analysts who want an opportunity to work this job. So starting out with identifying your needs, knowing what the capabilities of an analyst are, and then seeking the right person that fits that role. But there's a lot of them out there.
That's awesome. I think, Cindy, you're the ultimate example of finding your niche. You're definitely benefiting those that you serve. I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's been great information for any agency out there. It's not certainly limited to those in San Diego or California. This is information that will help anyone that's interested in crime analysis. So thank you again. Today's episode of Mobile Technology Spotlight has been sponsored by Samsung Electronics of America. Samsung's committed to supporting public safety and helping first responders use technology as a force multiplier. Program's been produced and presented by Public Safety Insight. Stay safe out there, everyone.